Now, what is the impact of a credit rating downgrade? The initial fear that people had, which has fortunately been diffused somewhat in the last month, is that, wow, this junk status will lead to massive sales of South African government bonds, which will lead to a collapse in the rand, a rise in domestic interest rates, and that would mean massive decline in consumption and investment. The second negative is that because government is now forced to borrow money at higher interest rates, that will mean it has to spend more paying interest on its government debt, and there will be then less available to spend on everything else, crowding out its ability to spend on infrastructure and social development. Now, neither of those two factors has yet been particularly material. Yes, the rand has fallen by 2% since Pravin was recalled. 2%. That's not going to cause huge inflation. And next week we've got a monetary policy committee meeting. There's no way the Reserve Bank's going to raise interest rates because inflationary pressures are actually declining. So we haven't had the worst case scenario of a collapse in the rand that would cause our interest rates to soar and economic growth to decline. Thus far, those aspects have not really had a hugely negative impact on the economy. But there are two other factors that are of concern. The first is uncertainty about further credit ratings downgrades and just general political uncertainty and the damage to confidence that the psychological facet that we are now junk status is having on the business community and on the desire to invest. Yes, junk status we are at already on our foreign currency debt, but our local currency debt, according to Standard & Poor's, is still at BBB-, which is investment grade. In the case of Fitch, both foreign currency and local currency debt has been downgraded to junk status, whereas in S&P's case, only foreign currency debt has been done. And in Moody's case, we're still 2 notches above junk status, and Moody's have said they're going to tell us what they're going to do. And if you look at the terminology they say so on I think it was the 4th of April, within 30 days to 90 days, we will inform you what's going to happen. So by the beginning of July, we'll know what Moody's will have done. The fact is that if Moody's downgrade us by 1 notch, we will still be investment grade according to what Moody's says. Now, why this is so important is because the really important ones that most in foreign investors focus on are Standard & Poor's and Moody's. And in particular, a very important issue is that South African government bonds form part of what is known as the World Government Bond Index of Citigroup. And in fact, there are some other bond indices, but the Citigroup one is the most important. And I think we account for 12% of the bonds within that index. And the stipulation is that if we get downgraded on local currency debt by both Standard & Poor's and Moody's, then we will have to drop out of that index, and that would force holders of tracker funds invested in that index to sell out of South African government bonds, and the amount that could be lost or flowing out of the country is in the region of $10 billion or 135 billion rand. That is huge. And that would cause the rand to tumble. But right now, we are not there yet. And that's why, in many respects, we have not seen the worst case scenario. On the contrary, what I showed you was that the rand has only fallen 2%. Long-term interest rates have in fact increased by, hardly increased since all these events. So we haven't seen the worst case scenario. But if this were to materialize and S&P were to indeed downgrade our local currency debt to junk and Moody's were to do so, then we'd fall out of the World Government Bond Index, and then you could see a massive sell-off in the rand. There's one important caveat that I haven't mentioned. Why is this so important? Also is because 90% of South African government bonds held by foreign investors are in local currency debt. Only 10% were in foreign currency debt, and that is why the impact of the initial downgrade to junk status from a technical point of view did not cause a huge outflow of funds from our bond market.